Welcome back to Silicon Heartland Sessions, the podcast where we explore the intersection of leadership, technology, and human potential in the Midwest and beyond. Today, I'm joined by Alfred Gracias, founder and CEO of Digital T3, a trusted technology partner for global businesses that delivers impactful applications and solves complex challenges through advisory and product development services. Alfred's career spans both technical depth and human-centered leadership. He's built Digital T3 into a company that's not just shipping code, but guiding transformation, building trusted relationships, and delivering value at scale. Throughout today's conversation, we'll explore Alfred's personal journey, his leadership philosophy, and his perspective on the future of tech and AI. But before we dive into that, Alfred, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Yeah, me too, man. And really, the honor is mine. To be honest with you, I'd love to start by maybe hearing a little bit about your origin story. When did you start Digital T3, and what inspired you to build it?
Yeah, so I started Digital T3 about almost 3 years ago. And the inspiration came from, having worked in many large enterprises, and then moving away from seeing what enterprises do, and also from there moving into a startup and seeing how startups work. And what I realized was there's really an opportunity for companies that are doing really niche things to be known in the large enterprises, and many times they don't get those opportunities. And my goal and mission was how do I bridge that gap? Because when you're doing something really cool and nobody knows about it, it's frustrating. So how do we get to the right audiences, navigate the landscape, navigate the noise, and get to the right stakeholders? So that was why I started Digital T3. And the 3 Ts basically are helping clients define their target, right? Helping them understand what are the techniques to solve a problem. And finally, the most important piece is then giving them a team of people to do it. So cool. At any point, customers are solving for one of the 3 Ts, or it's all of them together.
I love that. There's a lot of folks. Myself, I'll speak for myself. I've been in the enterprise my entire career, and I feel lucky to be a part of the Silicon Heartland here in Columbus, where we have this rich startup ecosystem. And you're one of the few people in my orbit that sort of heard the clarion call from the startup community and decided, you know what, I'm going to go chase this dream and build this company. And the thing that really strikes me is, when you look at the name Digital T3, I had no idea that the 3 T's were target, techniques, and team. That really says a lot to me in terms of, why you decided to pursue, building this company.
Yeah, absolutely. And it serves as a guiding principle, both for our clients and for our team too, right? So one of the things I saw in large enterprises and as you scale teams is a lot of people are not sure where are we heading, right? So I asked them, go back to the 3 Ts. Oh, what's the target? Because you build a lot of software and nobody uses it, or you didn't understand what they really wanted. So having clarity around what that target was, right, is so important. Not just sometimes the leadership knows it, but it never trickles down to the rest of the group. And the 3 Ts help keep us focused back to understanding the target, because then we may have other options and techniques to solve it.
Yeah. Well, I have to imagine it's a very consuming job that you have, which is really, really inspiring. So when I think about how you operate in this world, why don't we start by maybe talking a bit about work-life balance? And I have to imagine entrepreneurship. I kind of consider myself sort of a bit of an entrepreneur with Cloud Nirvana and the podcast and stuff like that. And it's really exciting. It's a lot of work. I have to imagine that somebody in your shoes, it can be really all consuming. How do you approach balance in your daily life?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And I think most entrepreneurs struggle with that because on one side, it can be all consuming, right?
Yeah.
But I also, one of the reasons I started to become an entrepreneur also, Sean, was to actually create this balance. Because when I was in the corporate world with a large team, at one point I was almost traveling 50,000 miles a month, right? So there was no balance there either. So I think we all struggle with work-life balance. So entrepreneurship definitely brings in a point where you could actually lose that balance, but it also gives you the opportunity to pick and choose what you want to work on. And part of why I became an entrepreneur was actually to create that balance, create the balance. So I had the opportunity to say no, right? A lot of times we struggle with saying no because, everything is an opportunity. There's potential to grow the business, grow revenue, build a team, everything is, and you could be chasing down multiple rabbit holes. So the way I do keep that balance is just first of all understanding really how's this really going to impact the client, right? Because and then determine feasibility of how to make that impact. And if that impact is not as going to be as significant and as it's just another run of the mill project, I am happy to say no and walk away. And that keeps balance because then you still enjoy doing what you're doing, and then you're still able to not end up working 24 hours 24 by 7, which we kind of tend to take for granted in the technology world. But that's leading to a lot of burnout for sure that we are seeing.
Yeah, I believe it. I guess on the one side, the benefits of being an entrepreneur, to your point, is, giving you the ability to have more, as you said, more balance in your life and being able to say
Right.
no to the things that you're not passionate about. I have to imagine there's lots of folks in the community that resonates with. I mean, who's not had the idea of, oh my gosh, I got this idea, I'd love to go start this business. But you actually did it. I think one of the things that tends to hold people back is that in the enterprise world, in the corporate world, there's safety there. You're guaranteed a
Yes,
paycheck. You're,
exactly.
and so whereas you may not have the kind of control that you want, you do have that safety net.
Right.
How did you overcome, like, how did you balance that? Um,
Yeah, so I think it's again a very good question. I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers, right? The biggest
yeah.
barriers is ensuring that, hey, you know what, my family is not impacted, right? That's going to be continued, keep the lights on at home, true, right? Which is very crucial for us. So I think the I took some time in planning that out, right? As they say, what I did when I left the corporate world, I went and worked in a startup, right? I went and I said, hey, if you want to learn how to cook something, you got to try it yourself. So I went and I learned in a startup, and I spent nearly 2 years there learning what are the ropes, what are the pains. So I had to do moving from a corporate, a large enterprise, a couple of 100,000 people over the globe to a startup made me unlearn some of the things and brought me back to my early days.
Yeah, I was, I
So it
was,
was
I
a
was gonna,
struggle.
yeah, I was gonna ask you that. So you saw a path, you saw this opportunity,
Yeah.
and your pathway was, okay, I know that I can't take this big risk and just leave the corporate world and jump in and start my own company, but I have some things to learn, and as you said, some things to unlearn. So
Yes.
what I'll do is go join a startup and sort of surround myself in that community, and then
Absolutely.
out of that, use that as a springboard for starting my own startups. That sound
Absolutely.
accurate? That's
I
amazing.
love the way you said it, Sean. And I think the big part of it is unlearning, and most people don't realize that
Yeah.
because we develop habits of being in the corporate large enterprise world for like 15, 20 years that
Hmm.
we take a lot of things for granted, and then you go back into the startup world and you're like, wait a minute, where are all the other people who are going to be in the conversation? No, well, it's only you. So I think the unlearning was more for me than and learning. There was definitely a lot of new learnings, and the learnings were amazing. But just rediscovering and rebooting and actually disrupting your own self. Just that you think if you want to go and be different in the industry and convey a different thought process, you yourself have to be different first.
Yeah, that is really well said. Disrupting your own self at a
Yeah.
high level. We're going to have opportunity to kind of get into the details around some of the things that you've learned and unlearned and the habits and so forth.
Yeah.
At a high level, can you maybe set the stage for that conversation and maybe, talk about at a high level, what were the main things that you had to unlearn? Like which to me speaks to the mindset of an entrepreneur
Yeah.
versus the mindset of somebody who's successful in the enterprise. There's definitely a shift there.
Absolutely.
How would you describe that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So the main thing for me was, we have read about, how culture eats strategy for breakfast, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But I actually, when I went to my second company, I actually saw the culture actually in play and how it was really different from the corporate world, where people were actually taken care of, where people were listened to. There were times where we would do, and it was during the COVID period too, right? So it was happened interesting during COVID, and a lot of us were remote. And we would still do, as part of the management team, I would still do meetings with some of select folks, and they would rotate folks around so they could talk to different people, and we would do feedbacks. But one was people felt that we were reaching out, talking to them, and secondly, the feedback would be like, "Hey, I've never got so much attention from my past employees that I've got from you guys in a few months,"
Wow.
and they'd been with their employees for years. So I think that kind of grounded me. And I think for large enterprises, as you grow and go up the chain, if you want to call it that, is that you don't realize you're losing connect with the ground. So that was my biggest learning, right? And I didn't ever want to lose that again. Is that the real transformation is happening on the ground. And if you, and I've mentioned one of the books, my favorite books is, the New Kingmakers. And it talks a lot about that. It talks about that, the transformation is happening on the ground. The CI is the last to know. So if we are not touched in tune with what's happening on the ground, we're not going to see that. So that's one of the biggest learnings I had to take away. On the unlearning side, I think just being again, as you grow and being a large enterprise, it ends up with a lot of numbers, and the people, and you realize that, hey, it's all about people. So you have to go back to working with people, ensuring that people on the ground have the same common understanding and vision of the company, and making sure there's good alignment there. So that was something, as leaders, as we grow, we kind of lose that, and we need to make sure we don't lose that. So that was something I had to do a relearning of. The focus is always on customer, but it's the people on your team that actually enables customers to be successful.
So you mentioned a book that I find really fascinating, and I wonder if there's not an opportunity to talk a little bit about this. I think that it maybe is a little bit of a tell in terms of the way in which you see the world. So
Yes.
there's probably a lot of folks
Absolutely.
I think there's probably a lot of folks who have never read the book. It's a book called The New Kingmakers: How Developers Conquered the World. It's a book by Stephen O'Grady, and it was published in 2013. And this book is all about how software developers, their influence has risen, like in the modern business landscape. And I use the term developers, but it probably can be said technologists.
Exactly.
So what's your thought on that?
Yeah. I think so. I think you're absolutely right. It changed my complete view, Sean.
Yeah.
And the main reason was, for the longest time in the corporate world, you have these set of governance committees, change approval boards, and all these guys at the top making all these decisions, right? What's happening is right at the bottom, people are just doing whatever they want, and they're getting the latest and the greatest of the products out there, and figuring out how to move because they are feeling the pain, right? And sometimes the people at the top are not real, who are setting all the standards and all of that, are not realizing that the what's on the ground is very different from what is being said. Because setting standards is great, but who's going to do it? Yeah. And the people doing it are struggling. And one of the best lessons I got from that book was, when many of these, if you talk about the Netflix and the Metas and all of the world, they hired great people. So people were like, where did they find all these people? And they were like, well, we actually hired them from you guys, from the enterprises, and we got out of their way. So that was that statement of, oh, these people are probably with you. They're probably sitting next to you. You just don't know that. What these guys did is they identified them and put them in the right spots, and then said, do what you do best. And I think that's an eye opener for leadership to understand that you're going to lose your best people if you're going to be in their way.
Yeah, because to your point, I mean, leadership that's disconnected from the way in which people do their jobs on a day-by-day basis. And if that leadership is constraining either their ability to to problem solve, or their ability to use their skills and their creativity,
Yeah,
then that can absolutely be a very significant limiting factor as to why
absolutely,
somebody would.
absolutely.
And it sounds to me like some of that what went into your calculus when you decided to leave the corporate world.
Absolutely. And I think there's one story, I don't want to give all the book away, but one story that always sticks with my in my mind is what Mark Zuckerberg did. He knew somebody doing really well, and then it was a really smart guy, and he wanted to hire the guy, and he refused to join him. So
Mm-hmm.
he wrote a check for 30 million, and he bought the company. And we're like, wait a minute, why would you spend 30 million just for this guy, right? He put him on a project on Facebook, and he made 2 billion.
Right.
Right?
Wow.
So if you have the right people, imagine if you had the right person who's next to you, but you just didn't know the potential. So identifying people's potential, right,
Mm-hmm.
and putting them in the right places can unfold a tremendous amount of disruption and innovation for companies. And everyone's looking for this, but they just don't go about doing it the right way.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's inspirational to hear your story about the things that were driving you to
Yeah,
make this change, and how you made a calculated plan to 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 prepare yourself
yeah,
to be able to build your own company. It's one thing to say, hey, I was able to do that and make the transition, but you've also been very successful. You
mm,
know, you've turned Digital T3 into a successful company.
yeah.
And that's another side of the equation. When you think about your success, what are the most valuable lessons or habits that have propelled
Yeah.
your success?
So I borrowed from some of these my of course my global experience. One realizing that there are good strong people all over the globe, right? Some of them we just don't know where they are, and that's part why I like to go travel. And I tell you, I'm the modern day Indiana Jones, traveling around the world, trying to find these
I like
really
that.
cool companies doing interesting things, and how do we enable them? How do we give them a chance, right? So that they get the opportunity to present and also make enterprises aware that these guys exist. So that is that bridge. I want to be that bridge, right? Finding those rights, and of course, growing up, I love those Indiana Jones stories. So, and if I wasn't in this business, I'll be an archaeologist. I love because history is probably my favorite subject.
Is it? Yeah,
And
very cool.
you can learn a lot from it, right? So taking some of those ingredients, right? I've imbibed that into the culture, right? People can come and feel comfortable to fail fast. I
Yeah.
think people struggle with that because I think the culture is like, you can put it on paper, policies, all of that, or you can demonstrate it.
Hmm.
And I've taken, right, I don't have anything on paper. I'm digital, right? So but I demonstrate to my team that, hey, if I'm in a meeting with you guys, you can come and say what you did, what worked well, what didn't work well, and how can we all as a team learn from it.
Right.
So taking those and just making it as part of your day to day. And I think I saw the struggles with some folks, especially when, when they come from different organizations. It takes some time for them to say, oh, can I really say that? And then they start saying it and there's no reaction. And like, oh, wow, I could actually say these things and get away with it. And then they feel more comfortable saying things because then you know what the reality is, right? Because
Right.
you don't want to post-mortem when somebody decides to leave. You want to be able to make them feel comfortable and grow as individuals also.
Hmm. That's fascinating. I think the thing that resonates with me the most as you're describing your story around and your keys to success, it comes back to people.
Yeah,
This whole idea of I love how you use that analogy, building a bridge. You're making a bridge. To me, that speaks to providing opportunity to folks that they wouldn't have otherwise.
absolutely.
And so, yeah, you travel in the world, Indiana Jones style, creating bridge and creating connections. Now,
Yeah, that's funny you said
yeah.
that because people used to I used to think of what do I put my title on LinkedIn and all that and digital transformation this and then people kept telling me, Alfred, you're always connecting the dots. I'm like, oh, maybe so that's what I do. So in fact, I mentioned that to somebody. I say there are people called glue people, and that's what I do, right? If I'm able to connect dots, connect people, enable people to do that, and that's part of my give back, right?
Hmm.
Is to just enable people and point them in the right direction. And a lot of folks today
Yeah.
don't have that opportunity. I got
Yeah.
some good mentors early days to help me with that, and everybody needs someone to guide them along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And like when you reflect on your journey, are there like specific relationships or even philosophies or like unexpected turning points that you would credit to your success?
Oh, there's a few some very interesting ones, Sean, and I think that it's like amazing how certain things happen. And one was when I was working in Europe, and my client decided to get married, and he said, okay, so you guys go back, spend time with your families, come back. And we were like, okay, go back. And when I went back. There was this training program going on, and it was all
Hmm.
around automation. And it was my curiosity was like, oh, I've never done that. And I found out there were some seats available, and I said, can I go attend? So being proactive to go and attend that training and learn something new. That has always been, I have that constant thirst for learning something new. But then I went back, and then I was also a person who would like record what I did. And I went back into the system and said, "Oh, I've done this training, and this is my learnings on it." And I continued to build on those qualities. And a couple of years later, when there was a need for somebody who knew the automation tools, they looked up in the system, and I was the only record they pulled up. And that's what brought me to the US for the assignment. And then
Wow.
the story is there, right? So it's just that sometimes when I look back, those simple things that I did,
Hmm.
what is kind of where I am today. And I think it's important for people to not really feel, oh, I did this and there's no result. Sometimes those results come years later, but it's the part what you did today.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, in that one moment where, I mean, you never would have taken that step, I
Yeah,
assume,
yeah,
had, that person not said, hey, I need to take some time off to go get married.
yeah, exactly. I would not have been in the place. I would not have seen those guys all getting together if I didn't have the curiosity to go say, hey, why am I not in
Yeah.
that meeting, and
Okay.
ask for it. So there's a lot of things you have to do on your side, but though that's what continues as you miss 100% of the opportunities you don't ask, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of the times when my curiosity helped me be part of a program, which then years later, kind of set the stage to what brought me to this country and made me where I am today.
I love it. I love it. I love how you're highlighting in a very, very pragmatic way, the benefits of having a curiosity based mindset. And
Yeah,
then, sometimes things happen and the timing is right. And that curiosity leads to an opportunity, and that opportunity leads to a whole shift in your journey. You
absolutely,
know?
absolutely, Sean. I think it's all
Yeah.
about creating the solid foundation blocks,
Yeah.
and then letting nature take its course.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. On the flip side, there's a lot to be said for, learning through your own mistakes. And, if you're like me, you've probably made some mistakes along the way. So like when you look
Quite a
back
few.
in your, when you look back, what are some of the biggest missteps that you've made?
Yeah.
And what did they teach you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest missteps was, I think, underestimating the complexity of some of the work that I took on, right? And not fully knowing what it is to take and to build transformation. Because to transformation there's one piece of it is technology, but there's also a people element and culture element of change. So that you need to understand the full scope of what it takes to transform. Otherwise, you end up with building a product and you think people will come, but it ends up that you build it and nobody will come. So that's been a big learning for me, and a mistake I made in the past, where we signed up to take on more than what we could chew,
Hmm.
and you end up with burning your fingers. However, on the flip side of that, I think you build some lasting relationships from there, right? It's
Yeah.
because when you're open and transparent about the mistakes you made, you'll be more than surprised when people come forward and say, "Oh, I can help you." And the other part of that learning was not asking for help. So I
Yeah.
realized that more times when we work with clients, partners, colleagues, right? Just being clear about what you can and cannot do is so important.
Yeah, that's really
And
well said.
yeah, and as you tend to grow in a larger organization, the organization and every organization has limits.
Hmm.
But I think in a startup as an entrepreneur, I think those limits are a lot more clearer.
Hmm.
And I saw that in my previous company was where we would very clearly say what we couldn't and cannot do from day one. And you could see the expression on people's face was like, oh, wow, nobody usually tells us what they cannot do. So I think that's the principles I built and taken from, because I made those mistakes where I said, hey, I could do it, couldn't do it, and then
Hmm.
end up with being in a bad spot, but then recovering from that and then realizing it's better to say what you can do clearly well and what you cannot do, because it also builds the foundation for trust.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. And kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier about you, going in this direction to have more freedom.
Yes.
I'm sure a lot of folks, I can relate to the idea that, within the work that I do in the community, it's easy to decide to go do something and not realize in the moment that, wait a minute, there are some very practical considerations we have to take into account. Do we have the right team? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the funds? Do we have the skills and the tools and
Yeah.
so forth?
Right.
Oftentimes, I would imagine in the world of entrepreneurship, it can be very, very tempting to take a
Yeah.
step or to go down a path just to find out that it wasn't the right thing to do, because it is too big. So in this example that you're going over, that you're sharing with us, in that moment when you realized that you had bitten off more than you can chew, so to
Mm.
speak, what was your course of action? What did you do? Did you change direction, or did you fail forward? Did that become a catalyst for something new, or?
Yeah, so what we did first we had a very open conversation with the client, right? And one of the things is I've seen and has worked well for me at least is that to build a relationship with the people and the stakeholders, and immediately go and tell them this is the problem, because a lot of times the tendency is like, oh, let's add more people, let's change this, let's try to manage it ourselves, let's still show a green project on the status report. But I did the opposite. I put it in red, right? And then
Okay.
I told my counterpart, and I said, "Hey, we are in red. I don't have an answer. Can we pause for 4 weeks?" I think that's probably the biggest time in my entire career, right? I was like, not sure how they would react, right? Because I've never done that before. But I really, I know, and I've seen so many projects where they keep extending the timeline just for the sake that nobody wants to just call a spade a spade. And I
Hmm.
said, that's just putting a band-aid, right? So I said, let's stop. Let's do a replanning. Let's go back to what we really understand we need to do to be successful. And then, as part of that pause, we all get a breather, give the team a breather, and come with, and maybe reframe the problem.
Hmm.
And this is coming also from there's books on. If you ever had a chance, another book, and I might have not mentioned it, it's called "What's Your Problem" from HBR,
Hmm.
and it's all about reframing problems. Sometimes we are solving a problem and so busy, and we love to do problem solving, all of us, that we might be solving the wrong problem, because we went so fast into solutioning, then not sitting back and thinking maybe that's another way to do it. So that book has great examples of how people have looked at industries that have been 30, 40 years solving something, and then somebody comes
Hmm.
back and looks at it. Wait a minute, look at it this way, and it will completely reshapes the way how things are done.
Yeah, that's really well said. On the other side of the equation, in that moment when you realize that, hey, wait a minute, we need to rethink this. It to me, it leadership means having the courage to be able
Accountability.
to
Yeah.
to be able to say that in the light of day
Yeah.
to your partner and to your client.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard, especially when the stakes are high. And maybe you've said some things, you've set a direction and so forth, and maybe said some things you now have to walk back,
Yeah.
because when you said those things, you hadn't realized the full scope of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's very true. In fact, I was appreciated for the fact that I said that, and and they took it really well. And they actually came back
That's
and said,
awesome.
actually, Alfred, that's one of the reasons we partnered with you.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that sometimes you don't realize that. And I think maybe this is a thing that we don't usually ask when we get selected to do a project, or we are part of an initiatives. Why was I selected?
Hmm.
And sometimes, it's usually capability and all of that, but there's all these other things, settled characteristics, and you're your own personal brand. So it's that integrity that you build and trust you build that people will come back to stay with you on.
Yeah. I think there's a really, really important lesson here that is just as relevant in the corporate world as it is in the startup world. And I think you said the word that I would use is authenticity, and
Yeah.
being true to your authentic self. I've
Yeah.
seen examples in my career where things weren't going the right way, and the leaders decided not to have that discussion. They didn't have the courage to be able to say, "Hey,
Yeah.
wait a minute, we need to pause. Let's just keep on going forward, and we'll hope that things work out for the best." And 9 times out of 10, they don't.
They don't. Yes, 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 yes.
So kudos to you. I am curious, now that we're sort of in talking a bit about leadership, what are some of the core principles that shape the way that you lead others?
Right. So I think I truly believe, Sean, is in my leadership is to empowering people. Right. Empowerment is the number one thing. It doesn't matter if they're successful or not, but if you don't give them the chance, they're never going to be you're never going to realize their potential. And the it's there's another story to this. If you have time, I'll talk about it too. Is that the when you empower people, right, you give them the opportunity to fail safely, right?
Yeah.
And they may not even fail, but once you tell them you have your back, that also improves the confidence. So empowerment automatically leads to confidence, and confidence then leads, and you acknowledge and appreciate what they're doing. They automatically, you will see more action coming from that. So they're all tightly related together, right? And then people realize that you're deeply devoted for them to be successful.
Hmm.
So just giving them the confidence and empowerment, right, to be at the front stage, is a part of my core focus, and
Hmm.
how I lead my teams.
How do you set the right guardrails, so that folks not only understand, because there's a lot to be said for, I know we like to say,
Yeah,
that these are the things that inspire innovation and so forth, and they do,
yeah,
as you said, making sure your team understands that you trust them, you've got their back,
right.
and based on that foundation of trust, innovation can spring up, with this
Yeah,
idea that now I can safely fail and so forth. But there has to be guardrails. There's something to be said also for
absolutely.
providing guardrails and making sure they understand these are the boundaries in which I'm empowering you to make those decisions. How do you go about making sure that people are empowered, within the appropriate constraints?
Yeah, yeah. So the way I've approached it, Sean, is that, take for example, someone's building a new product,
Mm-hmm.
and trying out some new things with AI or some latest technology, right? One is that they have the ability first to come and present it to myself, right? They have direct access. They don't feel we are flat organization, which means they can ping me directly and come and show me, hey, I have this idea. And then I give them feedback, encourage their proactiveness to even try something new, right? And then we do, with a larger safe group of people, that allows them to come back and build that confidence. So there's still the guardrails, and then we take it in front of the clients. And when we are in front of clients, what we are, I'm usually, it's myself or one of my other senior advisors on the call with the clients, and allows these folks, and these are folks are sometimes only a couple of years in the industry.
Yeah.
And this is my thought process, right? What I really want to disrupt is, you don't need to be 10, 20 years in industry. You can be a couple of years and really smart, but you may not have the other exposure and finesse. But to your point, that's where the guardrails we bring in, right? It's all around those things, not from a technology or the thought process side, because these are folks who have the thought process, but they may not be able to present themselves well.
Yeah.
So we help them preparation with preparing, and we ensure those guardrails are in place, and we give them some guidelines, and we found them to do really well.
So yeah, and so I love the juxtaposition and you bringing up this notion that there's a difference between people who are seasoned in their jobs and folks that are new in their careers and so forth, and providing them with ample opportunity to to learn and so forth. But to your point, there comes a time when you do need to like step in,
Yes.
and I imagine that mentoring others is very, very important to you. So how do you decide when to step in and to guide, versus kind of, stepping back and letting someone grow?
Yeah. And that's not an easy one, because you want
Yeah.
people to be successful. But one thing which I use as a guidance to help me in making sure it doesn't go too far is because we have this saying, especially in technology projects, right? Work expands to fill time. So
Mm-hmm.
you
Very
tell
true.
somebody something can get done in 48 hours, it'll get done. You tell them the same thing can be done in a week, it gets done in a week. So
Yep.
what I want to do is what we have done and implemented in everything that we do, right? Within a couple of days, or we run in almost 1 week sprints. Within a
Mm-hmm.
week, you come back and you present what you did,
Hmm.
right? It doesn't matter what it is. So the person feels like, oh, we don't go too far. And if I start to see that it's not happening, then I know the person needs help. Because one of the things I think we probably talked about a little bit earlier is the you want to ask for help, and asking for help. Sometimes people hesitate on that because they feel
Yep.
that it's taking something away from them, or it
Mm-hmm.
might be showing that they don't know something, which is okay. So the ability for us as leaders to step in at that point and give them the help that they need to be successful, right?
Right.
Or sometimes it might be just coming back and decomposition the problem into smaller pieces, and then they may see what has to be done.
Well said.
So
Yeah.
asking some right questions.
Yeah, I hear you. Sometimes, and I love your approach, but there are times
Mm.
when hard decisions just have to be made and they have to be made fast. So, what's your approach to making those hard decisions when the stakes are high and you don't necessarily have the time for coaching, for mentoring, for collaborating?
Yeah. I think there are times, and I've been on the spot a few times, and then what I do, my approach is then I get personally involved, because I
Yeah.
think when there are hard decisions, you got to lead from the front. There's no backseat driving at that point. You got
Yeah.
to lead from the front, explain
Mm-hmm.
to the team why you're getting involved. You're not taking anything away from them, but then you're also providing the air cover for them, and you're also able at that
Right.
point to manage the expectations and relationships that's got you to where you are, because the hard decisions really require either a change in approach, or in my previous example, we had to pause the project, right? So those are hard decisions, and I think leadership has to take those decisions. There's no pointing to the team at that point. You have to take
Mm-hmm.
those things and lead in front. And then the other thing, what we typically do is, because then there's always a tendency at some point to just throw additional people at it to solve the problem, but that's not always that. So what we do typically at that point is relook at what is there clarity on how would the product be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Can we relook at the problem again and go back to that, like I said, reframing the problem?
Yeah.
And then, is it all really must have?
Mm-hmm.
These are hard questions. Sometimes people don't ask, and we go back and look at it. Is what happens if you don't do this change?
Right.
And many times we realize nothing. So why did we take on all this and put pressure and lead to that point? We
Yeah.
just, again, back to that overcommitment, or something crept into the scope, which we know also is quite happens a lot, and we didn't have the confidence to push back.
Yeah. And when that does happen, do you tend to rely more on data, intuition, or people in those moments?
I've seen it. It's all a mix of the above, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
I think just being in the industry a long time, intuition helps. because you start to feel when someone starts to tell you, okay, it's happening next week, happening, so something is not going right. So you got to have that experience, but then you also don't want to jump in too early and derail them. You want to give them a chance to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do at that point also is we bring in some level of quality checks on it, right? Because one thing that the quality team does is that they set the bar on quality, so everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows the quality is needed. So they're
Right.
more the neutral player, because and then they paint a real clear picture of what's going on. And that's when data comes in. So the
Right.
quality of the severity of issues, all of that. If they come and raise, okay, there are 20 issues, but they're all like cosmetic, well, everybody's okay, because that's your data just fed into your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And while it might be an issue, you can still go forward with it.
Right.
And then it's the people on the ground telling you that, right? So it's not you making that decision. Everybody has a common view of where the quality of the product is.
Agree. Can you maybe share a time where you had to make a tough call and it changed the course of your company or your team?
Yeah, so I think last year when we were working on a product, we were just starting on our AI journey, and we were building a digital product. And at that point, there was a lot of debate happening on, is AI going to give us the right output? Is it the right LLM you're using? And these are all valid debates.
Mm-hmm.
And the debate was going on, and I said, hey, you know what, guys, and girls, the debate, let's continue the debate. Don't stop it, but we need to deliver. So
Yeah.
I'm not worried about the accuracy of the output. Let's get it all integrated.
Okay.
And they were waiting for the integration to happen last, because they wanted the perfect solution. And its integration will take like a day. Believe me, it took 2 weeks. So,
Mm.
and I'm glad I jumped in at that point, because that was the decision I had to make. I said, okay, I know that I'm okay with 50% accuracy, but let's get integrated. And believe me, once I got integrated, the accuracy was more than 50%. But that caused them to realize that it's an evolving space. So the perfect is an enemy of good, and the client was so happy to just see good, because we solved a very boring problem, and what we could deliver was much more than what they expected, even though it was not accurate.
Yeah. That's a very, very interesting point. I think a lot of folks could take a lot from that story around sort of the constraints that we put on ourselves, and which can really dilute our ability in terms of being agile. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff is really born out of experience. Your
Right.
ability to look at a situation and go, hey, the integration for this is more complex than you think. And the
Yes.
thing you're worried about, the LLM being perfect and so forth, number one, these LLMs are evolving at a very, very, very rapid pace.
Correct.
So
Correct. Yeah.
the day you go into production with whatever LLM you choose,
Yeah.
tomorrow there might be a better one. And so
Absolutely. Absolutely.
spending time on that integration, that's a key strategy in giving you that flexibility, so that as you grow, if you want to switch out an LLM, making that easy
Yeah.
is an important part of the equation. It sounds like to me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you think that we're, speaking of AI and large language models and so forth, and some of the real world challenges that you face, do you think that we're innovating faster than we're questioning?
I think we are producing more faster. I don't know if that's all innovation. There's
Yeah.
definitely more production happening because of what AI can help us in terms of the speed and what it can give us. But you're right. I don't think there's enough of questioning, and the
Mm-hmm.
reason is also the people who want to go fast are typically the technologists, because we love the latest and greatest.
Right.
Whereas the questioning is coming from the compliance, security, privacy, all these other groups, which is important. So we haven't reached that level of balance, because what's happening is there's big tech, of course, pushing agenda around what they need onboarded, but enterprises are being cautious, right?
Hmm.
We need to take them on that crawl, walk, and run journey, and they need to ask the right questions. They need to ask the
Yeah.
right questions because, and we will see the industry shift. This is almost, I have a feeling, is the early days of cloud, right?
Right.
When people, it's almost we're repeating that playbook, but now for AI. But AI could be as disruptive or even more disruptive than
100%.
cloud.
100%.
Um, and it is from early days in my experience, almost 90% of POCs are proof of value, so all got shut down because either there was issues with privacy, accuracy,
Mm.
compliance, and finally ownership. Sometimes it's not clear who owns what piece, right? If you're running
Right.
it on different things. So um, I think you bring up a very good point. I think it's speed versus having these other things in balance is going to be crucial as the enterprise adopts
Yeah.
uh, these new next generation technologies.
Couldn't agree more. These are very, very interesting times. I mean, very exciting times.
Absolutely,
You know
absolutely.
what? So along those lines, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and so forth. What excites you the most about the future of technology, and maybe what concerns you the most?
Yeah, I think what excites me the most is the potential. The potential is amazing.
Yeah.
Things that we could only think of doing, and the time it would take to do, and we also know, right, from many industry reports, a lot of IT projects fail. So ensuring these projects don't fail, right? Improving the reliability
Hmm.
of and the predictability of software products is where AI can help us a lot. And more importantly, as I'm involved in some very interesting products for building for my clients, where now we could open it up for non-technology people.
Hmm.
Who many people we are fortunate to have been in technology space and understand it, and we love the jargons, and we're made this exclusive club where it's hard for anybody else to get into. But for
Yeah.
other people who understand business but didn't have technology, the cloud gave them an ability to just manage infrastructure without having to go to the typical IT department and raise a service now ticket. So I think AI will help them with disrupting even what they want to build. So you can build something very quickly, use something very quickly, host it, and then have your ideas come to life
Yeah.
without having the nuances around Python and all these other technology mixes and front end, back end, which cloud native that we would love to confuse everybody with. Um, so
Yeah.
that's the art of I can see the art of the possible. Further down, it's going to open up so many new opportunities because this is a whole untapped set of people who have
Agreed.
not had the opportunity.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I think just having the right balances in place in terms of the guardrails for all these
Hmm.
technologies is going to be crucial, right? Because we don't want to reach a point where you ask AI for an answer, it gives you the answer, and you stop thinking because you
Right.
think that's what the answer is. And I'm starting to see that more and more that if we don't question the AI, we think the AI knows everything. Because, of course, AI might have been have a better answer than what we had, or if we had a question with three ideas and it came up with five,
Yeah.
we think that's the limit. But no, five might be 15. So we
Hmm.
need to collaborate still. We cannot we shouldn't just think that AI is going to do it. The collaboration, like we're doing today, you and me and building the community and
Hmm.
collaborating with the community, because it's the community that has the answers, and we need to make sure community stays on, and that and it's not the AI is not the end.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm actually very fascinated by, sort of that intersection where, AI's capabilities start to sort of encroach on, the things that we need to be focusing on as humans. We have in my opinion, we've got some important decisions to make in
Mm,
terms of what we are comfortable outsourcing to
mm,
AI and
mm.
what we're not.
Yeah,
Where do you draw the line between automation and like human value?
yeah. So for me, I'm very clear on that. I've taken a stance that it's always I hear about AI and then human in the loop. I have my philosophy is human with AI in the loop. Right. And the reason is very simple, is that the final decision is always human, right? This automation can happen, and it has to come back to the human to make the decision,
Yep.
and also qualify whether that was the right response or not, because hallucinations are still an issue. I'm sure it'll get better over a period of time, but it's still long ways from that. And end of the day, AI doesn't know how to say no. That's what people are realizing. So unless you prompt the AI and say, "Hey, give me an answer," if you don't know, say no, it won't say no.
Right.
So that going back to what I said, right? If you can't if you can't say no, that's going to be a problem.
Right. Well,
People are going to listen and move forward.
Yeah, I hear you, man. So along those lines, what would you tell someone, that's building an AI product today? What should they not forget?
So I would say focus on, there's two things, right? There's impact and feasibility. So start with impact. See what really impact it's going to impact your the work you do, the company you work with, your clients. What is the real impact there, right? Spend more time on that impact, and then get into feasibility. A lot of times, because feasibility is a challenge by itself, right? We're talking availability of data, infrastructure, ethics, governance, all of that. So all that has to be done. But first, start with the impact. If the impact is not clear, because a lot of times people jump into feasibility and build something, and they don't see they don't see a response, and because impact was not thought through. So that's the only thing is when we see everybody trying to automate everything in AI. For everything, AI is not, it's not the hammer and you go searching for the nail. So start with impact.
And when you say impact, is that another way of saying, make sure you have crystal clarity in terms of the why behind what you're doing?
Exactly. Absolutely, Sean. Understanding the why, right? It's the why you're doing it. Then what is it going to help, right? And then if it's going to help, so what? There are other solutions. Well,
very true.
It's going to be different. Okay. And now what are you going to do about it? So go with the what, so what, now what. Yeah. Right. So that's typically a simple framework I use when people ask me things. I ask them, "Hey, so okay, what's so great about your solution, and so what?" Right? There's 100 other solutions, and then it's like, "No, mine is different for these reasons." Okay, now what do we do about it? Right. How can we actually see it work in real life, and who's going to feel that impact of that?
Right. Can you maybe share a time when, technology helped you solve a problem that once felt unsolvable?
That's a good question. I think technology for the products I built in the past for many of my clients, we built a very interesting product, and this was typically more for expat travel. And what would happen is expats would travel around, and there was something called accidental expat. So what would happen would be is like, you have to, and this is for tax reasons, right? If you stayed so many days in California, then you might have to pay the California tax. And if you travel and stayed in so many states, so if you're a traveling consultant and you might go across the globe, and if you stay more than 180 days out of the country, you might be liable for taxes in that country too. Yep. So what would happen is people would, and it's hard to keep track, right? Everybody doesn't have an Excel sheet and managing their days and all that. So what would happen is sometimes people would travel and then suddenly realize end of the day they actually accidentally became an expat in another country. So and then of course suddenly your tax liabilities would go crazy, right? So right. We built a technology to help with looking based on your mobile phone, because you always take your mobile phone, and your coordinates would tell you, would go back to the app to tell the person, okay, now this is your summary and your exposure of days across these parts of the world. So you could figure out whether there's a exposure. Potentially, you could become an expat and tell you, okay, now stop traveling for another week so that you don't cross your limit.
And did this solution require any sort of novel technologies, or is this something that you built using sort of more a traditional tech stack?
Yeah, it was the interesting. It was a traditional tech stack, but the novel part was just capturing the GPS coordinates, and making sure that they came back, and it was part of the proactive monitoring to let the individual know, hey, if you continue on this travel and in these locations, then you could potentially become an expat.
Right.
So just capturing that and bringing that back was kind of the real time or near real time impact was novel at that time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, what would you say, maybe switching gears just a little bit, in all of your travels and your experiences and solving these problems and so forth and having these insights along the way, what would you say is the best piece of advice that you've ever received? And how has that advice shaped your life or your leadership?
Yeah, I think the best advice I've got was from a mentor of mine, and um, the he said, a lot of people talk about what holds them back, and it's fear, right? So he says, what he told me was that if you know that you're going to create impact, there's nothing to fear about, right? If you feel you're doing the right thing, then do it. And it was a very interesting story he gave me. Was he's a traditional guy, and he was going into he was from India, and he was going into the Indian consulate to get a visa stamped. And back in those days, going into the Indian consulate was like terrifying, right?
Oh, really? Wow.
Because you're not sure whether you'll get your visa. You'll get your visa, and then the officer would be ask you a lot of questions, and then you'll be like, oh, it's like the most terrifying time, because everybody wanted a chance to go. And he was teaching in Purdue as a mathematics professor. So typically people would go for that interview. Sean would go dressed up, suit, clean, looking your best, so you make a good impression with the visa officer and get your visa.
Wow.
He went with just a traditional garment, no shirt, because that's how he is, and he had his holy powder on the top of his head, no slippers, no shoes, nothing, barefoot, and he walked in, and you can imagine him is a big guy, like 6-foot guy. Probably 200 plus pounds, and then he put his passport, and the officer looked at him and said, "Tell me one reason why I should give you this visa." And he said, 47 students on Monday morning will not have a professor.
Wow, there you go.
No discussion. He doesn't say who he is, nothing. This is the impact of what your action would be. You decide.
Wow.
Right? So needless to say, the guy gave him the visa. But I think
is awesome.
That story kind of changed my view on everything, right? Sometimes we are thinking what the other person is going to do, and we create all this thing about us. But if you're doing the right thing, it doesn't matter how you look, what you're dressing, who you are, right? What's the impact you're creating? And if you explain your impact, right, and that what you're providing and impact of the other person's decision, then let's let them decide.
Well said, man. I got to tell you, Alfred, just in wrapping up, I do really want to be respectful of your time. This has been a great conversation, incredibly grounding and inspiring. Talking about your entrepreneurial journey, lessons learned through leadership, to the way you think about mentorship and decision making, and to your point, the real potential of technology to serve people. With all that as a backdrop, before we close, I do have one final question for you. So if you could leave our listeners just with one key takeaway, whether it's about leadership or technology or navigating the road as a founder, what would it be?
Yeah, I think be thankful, right? I think sometimes we don't realize how fortunate we are and the opportunities we were given. So it's important to be thankful for that, and provide ways to help others, and not think about getting anything back. So I think just enabling others and being thankful for what you have received, I think is just my last few words.
Well, that said, that word thankful, I want to say thank you so much, Alfred. Your story, it really carries a sense of conviction and real care and clarity. I know this episode is going to resonate with the builders and the leaders and the dreamers in our community. I'll be honest with you, man. I'm really, truly honored to include you in my tribe of mentors. You've really reminded us that while technology enables the future, it's purpose and connection that truly define it.
Yeah.
So,
thank you. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate you doing this.
My pleasure.
On the call.
Anytime, Alfred. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Very good.
And I tell you what, to everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us on Silicon Heartland Sessions. Yeah, if this conversation sparked reflection or encouragement or even a new question, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Until next time, lead with vision, build with heart, and stay grounded in what matters most. Thanks, Alfred.
Thank you.